A professor at Princeton named Daniel Kahneman ran the numbers on 450,000 Americans and published a finding in 2010 that became one of the most quoted statistics in personal finance. Beyond $75,000 in annual income, he found earning more money did not improve a person's day-to-day emotional well-being. And that single data point has been misread in ways that are costing the average American household somewhere between $400,000 and $1.2 million in lifetime wealth. The mechanism behind that cost is called hedonic adaptation. It is not a character flaw, a weakness, or a failure of willpower. It is a deeply embedded feature of how the human brain processes experience. Psychologists Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell named it formally in 1971, and it describes the documented tendency of humans to return to a stable baseline level of happiness regardless of whether something dramatically good or dramatically bad has happened to them. Lottery winners, within 18 months of their windfall, reported happiness levels nearly indistinguishable from control groups who had won nothing, as Brickman and his colleagues documented in a landmark 1978 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. The brain is an extremely efficient adaptation machine. It normalizes. And when it normalizes to a new income level, the previous standard of living begins to feel like deprivation. This is where the financial damage begins. A household earning $80,000 receives a promotion that brings them to $110,000. For approximately 3 to 6 months, the additional income registers as genuine abundance. The family takes a better vacation. They eat out more often. The car lease comes up for renewal, and this time they move up a trim level. Within a year, the $110,000 feels like the new minimum. The family is not saving the difference. They are spending it. Often they are spending slightly more than the raise itself, financing the gap with credit. Because the upgrade cycle, once started, does not stop at the exact boundary of new income. The cultural anthropologist Grant McCracken named one specific version of this phenomenon in 1988. He called it the Diderot effect, after the 18th century French philosopher Denis Diderot, who wrote a famous personal essay about receiving a beautiful new scarlet robe as a gift. Diderot was poor when he received it. The robe was magnificent. And almost immediately, everything else in his life began to look inadequate by comparison. He replaced his worn carpet, then his chair, then his desk, then his art, until he had spent himself into debt chasing the coherence of a life that matched the robe. McCracken's insight was that consumption is not a series of independent decisions. Each purchase resets the standard against which all surrounding purchases are measured. The new car makes the old house feel embarrassing. The kitchen renovation makes the bathroom look dated. The lifestyle inflates not because of greed, but because the brain is constantly recalibrating what counts as normal. The data on this effect at the population level is stark. The Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances consistently shows that savings rates do not increase proportionally with income for most American households. A household earning $50,000 saves approximately 5 to 7% of take-home income. A household earning $100,000 saves approximately 6 to 8%. The additional income is absorbed almost entirely by expanded lifestyle. This is what economists call the marginal propensity to consume, and for middle to upper middle class Americans, it runs remarkably high precisely in the income bands where the opportunity to build meaningful wealth is greatest. Thomas Stanley and William Bengen spent years documenting the real financial behavior of America's millionaires in their 1996 research book, The Millionaire Next Door. Their findings defied the cultural image of wealth. The median millionaire in their sample drove a used car, often a domestic model more than 3 years old. They lived in modest homes relative to their income. They had occupied the same house for a median of 20 years. Their defining characteristic was not what they earned. It was the gap they maintained between what they earned and what they spent. Stanley coined 2 terms for the 2 dominant patterns his research uncovered: PAW, or prodigious accumulator of wealth, and UAW, or underaccumulator of wealth. The UAWs were typically high earners with high expenses who looked wealthy, but had minimal net worth. The PAWs were people who had systematically refused to let lifestyle inflate in proportion to income, and who had quietly built fortunes that their neighbors could not have guessed. The mathematics of that refusal are extraordinary when compounded. Consider 2 individuals, both starting at age 30 with a $90,000 salary. Individual A receives a 3% raise each year and spends every dollar of it on lifestyle upgrades, a textbook lifestyle inflation pattern. Individual B receives the same raises but holds spending at year 1 levels, directing the difference into a broad market index fund earning the historical real average of approximately 7% annually after inflation. At 7%, money doubles roughly every 10 years by the rule of 72. By age 60, individual A has maintained their lifestyle and has minimal investable assets beyond mandatory retirement contributions. Individual B has built a net worth that, by the end of 3 doubling cycles, approaches 7 figures. The difference did not come from earning more. It came from spending less of what was already being earned. The paradox embedded in Kahneman's original finding, and lost in nearly every popular account of it, is that day-to-day emotional well-being is not the only dimension of happiness that matters financially. In 2021, Wharton researcher Matthew Killingsworth used a real-time experience sampling methodology with 33,000 Americans and found that experienced well-being does continue to rise with income beyond the $75,000 threshold. He and Kahneman then published a collaborative paper in 2023 reconciling their findings, and the conclusion was precise. It is not income that determines sustained well-being, but the sense of control, progress, and security that income can provide, specifically when it is not immediately consumed. Saving generates a compounding sense of stability that the brain does not adapt away from in the same manner. It adapts away from consumption. A growing investment account does not become invisible the way a higher cable package or a newer car does. Its signal remains legible because it represents optionality, the removal of future constraint. Rather than a sensory experience, the nervous system learns to tune out. The practical response to hedonic adaptation is not austerity. It is what behavioral economists call a savings architecture, a structural intervention that operates before the brain has a chance to establish a new baseline. The mechanism is straightforward. At the exact moment income increases, the entire post-tax difference is redirected automatically to investment or retirement accounts before it appears in a checking balance. The brain never perceives the income as available spending money. It cannot adapt to what it never registers. This is the mechanism behind what financial researcher David Bach has long called paying yourself first, not as a motivational metaphor, but as a neurological strategy that works precisely because it roots income around the adaptation process rather than trying to override it through willpower after the fact. A complementary approach, drawn from the research of psychologist Sonia Lyubomirsky at the University of California, Riverside, involves varying experience rather than upgrading baseline consumption. Lyubomirsky's work on hedonic adaptation prevention found that variety, genuinely different experiences in different contexts, sustains an emotional signal that would otherwise be habituated away. Applied to personal finance, this means that a high-quality restaurant visited 3 times a year remains a source of real pleasure. The same restaurant visited every week becomes invisible to the pleasure system and ceases to register as an upgrade at all, while its monthly cost has become structural. Rotating modest experiences preserves the signal. Entrenching upgraded baselines destroys it. The brain's capacity to normalize is not inherently the enemy of wealth. Directed deliberately, it becomes wealth's most powerful engine. When saving and investing become the established baseline, when a growing net worth is what the brain has calibrated as the minimum acceptable condition, hedonic adaptation works entirely in your favor. The same mechanism that made last year's raise disappear into higher monthly expenses will make a savings habit feel non-negotiable, a budget cut feel like a genuine loss, and compound growth feel like the only acceptable trajectory. The architecture of automation and consistency is not a disciplined strategy. It is a rewiring of what the brain calculates as the floor below which it refuses to fall. Kahneman's research was never a license to spend. It was a map of the psychological territory that every wealth-building strategy must account for. Subscribe to Wealth Science for more research-backed financial insights every week.